Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation, which will help you to prepare for the roles of designated prescribing practitioner and practice supervisor. By the end of this presentation, you should have a good understanding of the programme and what you and your student need to do in relation to practice supervision and assessment and completion of the relevant documents. You should also have a brief overview of the overall assessment strategy, which may help you to support your student in being successful. If you have any concerns at any stage, you should also know how to escalate this by using the appropriate form. The programme is delivered at both UEA and the Royal Marsden School with core teaching teams at both sites. We're supported by a wider team of colleagues within the schools who can be contacted if necessary. As we may be working remotely, email is the preferred method of contact, or MS Teams. We normally respond to email within 48 hours, but you're welcome to contact us on Teams for more urgent matters. Independent prescribing is often referred to as non-medical prescribing to include the wider group of professionals who now have prescribing rights. Independent prescribing has evolved since the Cumberledge Report in 1986, with amendments to the Human Medicines Regulations permitting other professions to prescribe, the latest additions being paramedics. All of these healthcare professionals must undertake a programme of education which is approved by the respective professional regulator before they prescribe any medicines. On successful completion of the programme, a registrant can have their record updated to show this qualification. There may also be some local procedures prior to being able to start prescribing, for example, sample signatures to pharmacies. The programme has approval from both the HCPC and the NMC and meets the respective standards for prescribing. Both regulators have adopted the RPS 2016 Competency Framework for all prescribers. The RPS published the competency framework in acknowledgement that there's a common set of competencies underpinning prescribing practice, regardless of professional background. The learning outcomes for the programme have been developed to reflect the dimensions of the competency framework, and you'll also see that the PAD incorporates the competency template. This slide lists the prerequisites of students applying for the programme of study. They're all checked in the application process. Essentially, the applicant should have a previous year in the field of the intended practice, and prescribing must have been identified as essential to their role. The line manager must also confirm that the student has sufficient therapeutic and diagnostic ability relevant to the area of practice. Preferably, they'll have a completed physical assessment course, but if this isn't the case, then the line manager confirmation is sufficient. The student must also have the support of a DPP who can commit to 78 hours of supervision over the 26 weeks. And the DBS should have been done within 3 years of the end of the programme. The module is delivered predominantly online in 12 blocks of theory released every 2 weeks on the virtual learning environment Blackboard, in addition to the 78 hours of supervision in the practice area. The learning blocks have 10 to 15 learning steps with some discussion board and workbook tasks. The discussion boards allow the students to share experience and knowledge as part of a community of learning, and the webinars are used to reflect on the previous block to build on learning. Pandemic permitting, it's hoped to have 2 attendance days as well to enhance networking and the student experience. This module can be accessed as part of a programme of study or as a credit-only standalone module. On successful completion, the student will gain 40 academic credits at level 7. It's important to say that this is a generic course in which students will learn principles of prescribing practice rather than the specifics of their own practice, as that wouldn't be possible given the wide range of specialities. We'll cover skills which relate to the competency framework, including consultation skills, evidence-based practice, shared decision-making, pharmacology and legal and ethical issues. A more comprehensive list is available in the handbook. Students will learn how drugs work and gain a satisfactory understanding of p-kinetics and p-dynamics to support safe practice. We also invite specialist practitioners to share their experience and advice to new prescribers. Some of this advice is often about medicines optimization and deprescribing, or non-pharmacological measures that may be more appropriate. This isn't an exhaustive list, of course, and you'll find supplementary information in the handbook. Designated prescribing practitioner is an umbrella term introduced by the Royal Pharmaceutical Society in 2019. It covers roles identified by the regulators That is, Practice Assessor for NMC registrants and Practice Educator for HCPC registrants. This role has previously been undertaken by designated medical practitioners or DMPs. The regulators have allowed for the use of the term DPP, as long as we're clear about what this means. The DPP can be a prescriber with a recorded qualification of any profession. The practice supervisor can be an independent prescriber of any profession with a recorded prescribing qualification who's also completed appropriate training and is prepared to facilitate learning. The academic assessor will be an academic in the university who is suitably prepared and has relevant knowledge and skills. They will also usually have a recorded prescribing qualification. Midwife students must also liaise with the lead midwife for education to ensure support throughout the programme. As in the previous slide, recent regulatory changes allow for suitably qualified and experienced non-medical prescribers to supervise and assess IP students. The competencies for the roles are set out in the RPS 2019 Competency Framework for DPPs, for which you'll find a link on the Practice Educator website. You'll also be asked to self-assess against the competencies and return the signed declaration form to the email address on the form. Medical supervisors are naturally still very welcome, but must also assess against the DPP competencies. Eligibility for the role of DPP is restricted to those with more than 3 years of prescribing experience in the same field as the student. The prospective DPP must be able to meet the competencies and be able to provide a learning environment for the student as well as 78 hours of supervision. If practice assessor or educator training has been completed in another university, a copy of the certificate can be provided with the declaration form. As part of the DPP role, we'll ask you to plan 3 interviews with the student as a minimum at the beginning, middle and end of the module. In the first interview, you should develop a learning contract to signpost student learning and to help you in facilitating the student in meeting the competencies. The competencies must be signed by the DPP, although you may delegate some of the supervision to appropriate professionals who can contribute to this. The Practice Assessment Document, or PAD, will be hosted on the e-PAD platform PebblePad. The outline document is available on the Practice Education website. There's space for 3 interviews and a competency template. Please try to conduct the final interview about 4 weeks before the submission date, which your student will be aware of, so that there's time for a remedial plan if required. If a remedial plan is needed, then please contact the academic assessor for support to develop this. Please note that the competencies must be signed by the named DPP, although the practice supervisor may add feedback into the template. The PAD forms are part of the evidence to be provided in the PebblePad portfolio, which will collectively demonstrate that the RPS competencies have been met. We'll also ask you to formatively assess the learner's consultation skills using the form provided. Please ensure that any local requirements of service user consent are adhered to. The learner should also gather feedback from at least one service user to include in the portfolio. Supervision needn't be all face-to-face. You may wish to arrange for your student to spend time with other appropriate colleagues, but you remain responsible for the supervision and the final confirmation that the student has met the competencies and is safe to prescribe in the area of practice. A range of other evidence should also be included in the portfolio to evidence that the learning outcomes have been met. These are listed in the slide and the assessment handbook and the DPP handbook for your information. It's important that the DPP liaises with the practice supervisor where appropriate throughout the programme to make sure that the learning opportunities are being provided, and also communicate with the academic assessor as progression and achievement are critical. The AA will also complete a final sign-off. If your student has a reasonable adjustment plan in place or is seeking support from any of the university services, please also ensure that you're able to accommodate any of these adjustments to facilitate learning. If at any time you have a concern about a student, you're very welcome to contact the core team to discuss your concerns, and there's a form on the Practice Education website if you wish to raise this formally. There is a robust assessment strategy which includes formative assessments, which will prepare for the summative assessments. In addition to the summative practice assessment and portfolio, the student will also have a numeracy assessment, a pharmacology examination, and will submit a 4,000-word case study, which will be graded using the 7 marking scales. Students are allowed 2 attempts at all assessments, and if they feel that their ability to study has been affected in any way, they can submit an extenuating circumstances form for consideration by the EC panel. This form is also the first step in seeking extensions or breaks in study. Students are expected to adhere to their respective codes of conduct at all times. They should work within their competence, acknowledge limitations, and seek support and advice appropriately. The student must not prescribe until they're on the respective register and they've fulfilled any local expectations of employers. In most cases, there's paperwork to complete to notify the employer in dispensing pharmacists. Thank you once again for taking the time to support a student and listen to this presentation. Once you've had the opportunity to self-assess against the competency framework for DPPs and signed and returned the declaration form, you'll be able to offer a place on the programme to the student. Please remember that you aren't alone and that we're here to help and happy to hear from you at any time.